2 weeks ago, I discovered that my ex-boyfriend had been remotely accessing every smart device in my apartment for the past 4 months. He'd been watching me through my security cameras, listening through my smart speakers, and even controlling my thermostat and lights to mess with me. I only found out because he got careless and accidentally played his own voice through my Alexa while I was home. I'm 27F, and my ex-boyfriend Tyler is 30M. We dated for about a year and a half before breaking up 6 months ago. Tyler works as a cybersecurity specialist for a tech company, so he's extremely knowledgeable about networks, hacking, and digital security. During our relationship, I actually felt really safe knowing that Tyler could protect me from online threats and scams. Tyler was the kind of person who could fix any tech problem and always had the latest gadgets. He'd helped several of our friends set up their home networks and had even done some freelance consulting for small businesses who needed their systems secured. I was always impressed by how quickly he could diagnose problems and come up with solutions that seemed way beyond my technical understanding. When we first started dating, Tyler was impressed by my smart home setup. I had invested in a bunch of connected devices over the past few years: smart doorbell with camera, security cameras inside and outside the apartment, smart locks, smart thermostat, several Alexa devices, smart TV, and even smart light bulbs throughout the place. I'd also recently added a smart refrigerator and a robot vacuum that I could control from my phone. Tyler helped me optimize the whole system and set up better security protocols. He said most people's smart home networks were incredibly vulnerable to hackers, but he could make mine virtually impenetrable. He spent an entire weekend configuring everything, setting up a dedicated network for my smart devices, and installing additional security software that he said would monitor for unauthorized access attempts. Tyler even created custom automation routines that would adjust my lights and temperature based on my daily schedule, and he set up a sophisticated backup system for all my security camera footage. He was really proud of the work he'd done and would often brag to friends about how secure and efficient my smart home system was compared to theirs. At the time, I was grateful for Tyler's help. The system ran much more smoothly after his modifications, and I felt secure knowing that someone with his expertise had locked everything down properly. Tyler also taught me how to use some of the more advanced features and showed me how to monitor the system's security status through various apps. Our relationship was pretty good for most of the time we were together. Tyler was smart, funny, and we had a lot in common. We both loved technology, enjoyed cooking together, and had similar goals for our careers and future. But toward the end, he started getting really possessive and controlling. He'd get upset if I made plans without him, would question me about where I'd been and who I'd talked to, and started checking my phone constantly. Tyler also became increasingly paranoid about my interactions with other men. He'd get jealous if I mentioned male coworkers, or if I talked to guys when we were out together. He started insisting on picking me up from work and would get angry if I went anywhere alone, claiming he was worried about my safety. The final straw was when Tyler installed a tracking app on my phone without telling me. I only discovered it when my friend pointed out that my battery was draining unusually fast and suggested I check what apps were running in the background. When I dug deeper into my phone settings, I found an app one didn't recognize that was constantly running location services. When I confronted Tyler about the tracking app, he claimed he'd installed it for my safety because he worried about me walking alone at night. But when I told him to remove it immediately, he got defensive and said I was being paranoid and that people in relationships should be transparent with each other. He also said that since he'd helped me secure all my other devices, I should trust his judgment about what was necessary for my protection. I broke up with Tyler that same day. I told him that installing tracking software without my consent was a huge violation of my privacy and that I couldn't trust him anymore. Tyler was furious and said I was overreacting to something he'd done out of love and concern. He kept insisting that he'd only installed the app because he cared about me and wanted to make sure I was safe. The breakup was messy. Tyler alternated between begging me to take him back and getting angry about how I was throwing away our relationship over a misunderstanding. He kept texting and calling for weeks, trying to convince me that I was making a mistake and that no one would ever care about me as much as he did. I ended up blocking Tyler on everything and told him not to contact me anymore. After about a month, the calls and texts stopped, and I thought he'd finally accepted that our relationship was over. But weird things started happening around my apartment almost immediately after the breakup. At first, I just thought I was being paranoid, or that my smart home devices were glitching. My thermostat would randomly change temperatures in the middle of the night, sometimes dropping to 60 degrees, or jumping up to 80. My smart lights would turn on and off at strange times, often in sequences that seemed almost deliberate, like someone was testing to see if I'd notice. My TV would occasionally change channels or adjust the volume when I wasn't using the remote, usually switching to news channels or documentaries that I never watched. My robot vacuum would start cleaning cycles at 2 a.m., waking me up with its noise as it bumped around my bedroom. I also started getting notifications from my security system about unusual activity, but when I checked the footage, everything looked normal. The notifications would usually happen when I wasn't home, so I figured it was just the system being overly sensitive to changes in lighting or maybe detecting my neighbors walking by outside. The smart lock on my front door would occasionally make clicking sounds like someone was trying to unlock it, but when I checked the app, it would show the door as still locked and secure. About 2 months after the breakup, I started feeling like someone was watching me. I'd get this creepy feeling when I was home alone, like there were eyes on me even though I was obviously by myself in my locked apartment. The feeling was strongest when I was in my living room or bedroom, where most of my security cameras were positioned. I chalked it up to stress from the breakup and maybe watching too many true crime shows. But the feeling persisted, and I started being more careful about what I did when I was home alone. I'd close my curtains earlier in the evening and started changing clothes in my bathroom instead of my bedroom. Around the same time, I noticed that my Alexa devices were responding to things I hadn't said. I'd be sitting quietly reading or working on my laptop, and suddenly Alexa would start playing music or would say she didn't understand what I'd asked. When I'd say I hadn't said anything, she'd apologize and go quiet again. This happened multiple times per week, usually when I was having phone conversations or when I was talking to myself while cooking or cleaning. Sometimes Alexa would respond with answers to questions I hadn't asked, or she'd start listing local business hours for places I'd never mentioned. I looked up troubleshooting tips online and found that smart speakers sometimes pick up sounds from TV shows or conversations that sound like wake words. I figured that was probably what was happening and didn't think much more about it. But then my friends started commenting on how much I seemed to know about their lives. I'd mention things they'd told me in private conversations, or I'd reference plans they'd made that I wasn't supposed to know about. When I'd ask when they'd told me these things, they'd look confused and say they didn't remember sharing that information with me. When my friend Sarah asked how I knew she was thinking about switching jobs, I was confused because I didn't remember her telling me that. Sarah said she'd definitely never mentioned it to me, and that she'd only talked about it with her boyfriend while they were at home watching TV in their living room. Similarly, my friend Emma was surprised when I asked about her mom's surgery, because she said she'd only discussed it with her sister during a private phone call from her apartment. These conversations were happening when I wasn't around, so there was no way I should have known about them. That's when I started wondering if somehow my smart devices were picking up conversations from other apartments, or if there was some kind of cross-wiring issue with the building's internet or cable systems. But my apartment building is pretty well insulated, and I'd never had problems with hearing neighbors before. 3 months after the breakup, things escalated significantly. I started receiving anonymous texts with photos of me inside my own apartment. Pictures of me cooking dinner, watching TV, working out in my living room, even sleeping in my bed. The photos were clearly taken from inside my apartment, but I couldn't figure out how someone was getting these images. The angles and qualities suggested they were coming from my own security cameras. The texts came from different numbers each time, and they never included any messages, just the photos. Sometimes I get multiple photos from the same day, showing different activities throughout my routine. I saved everything and considered calling the police, but I wasn't sure what they could do about anonymous texts, especially since the photos weren't threatening or inappropriate. I also started having problems with my smart locks. They would randomly unlock themselves, usually in the middle of the night. I'd wake up to notifications on my phone that the front door had been unlocked, and I'd have to get up to check that no one had actually entered the apartment. The first few times this happened, I was terrified that someone was trying to break in. But my security cameras never showed anyone at the door, and nothing was ever missing from my apartment. I assumed it was a malfunction and started manually checking that the door was locked before bed, sometimes checking multiple times because I'd gotten so paranoid about it. But the random unlocking kept happening, sometimes multiple times per week. I contacted the smart lock company's customer service, and they walked me through some troubleshooting steps, but the problem persisted. They even sent me a replacement lock, but the new one had the same issues. Around this time, I also started noticing that my internet usage was much higher than normal. My monthly data usage had nearly doubled, even though my streaming and browsing habits hadn't changed. When I called my internet provider to ask about it, they said unusual data usage could indicate that someone was accessing my network without authorization or that malware was running on my devices. The customer service representative suggested I run security scans on all my devices and consider changing my Wi-Fi passwords, but everything seemed normal when I checked. My devices weren't showing any signs of malware, and my network security settings looked the same as Tyler had configured them. That conversation made me start thinking about whether all these weird incidents could be connected. Random device malfunctions, anonymous photos taken inside my apartment, unexplained internet usage, smart locks unlocking themselves. It was starting to seem like more than a coincidence. I decided to do some research about smart home security and discovered that connected devices could be vulnerable to remote access if they weren't properly secured. I learned that hackers could potentially view camera feeds, listen through smart speakers, and control various devices if they gained access to the network. But Tyler had secured my system, so I figured I was protected from that kind of attack. Plus, who would want to hack into my random apartment? I wasn't anyone important or wealthy enough to be a target for sophisticated cybercriminals. 2 weeks ago, everything finally came together in the most disturbing way possible. I was home on a Saturday afternoon doing laundry and cleaning my apartment. I had music playing through my Alexa in the living room while I worked in the bedroom, folding clothes and putting them away. It was a peaceful afternoon, and I was actually feeling more relaxed than I had in months. Suddenly, the music stopped and I heard Tyler's voice coming through the Alexa speaker. At first, I thought I was hallucinating or that somehow my brain had misinterpreted the song lyrics. But then I heard Tyler clearly say my name and ask if I was home. I ran into the living room and stared at the Alexa device, which was glowing blue like it was actively listening or responding to commands. I asked who was there, and Tyler's voice came through the speaker again. "It's me," he said. "I've been trying to talk to you." I was absolutely terrified. I unplugged the Alexa immediately and grabbed my phone to call the police. But before I could dial, Tyler's voice came through a different Alexa device in my bedroom. "Don't call the police. I just want to talk to you. I miss you." I realized that Tyler had somehow gained access to my smart home system and had been using it to spy on me. All those weird incidents over the past months suddenly made perfect sense. The random thermostat changes, the lights turning on and off, the TV changing channels. Tyler had been remotely controlling my devices. The anonymous photos were screenshots from my own security cameras that Tyler was accessing, without my knowledge. The smart locks unlocking themselves weren't malfunctions. Tyler was deliberately unlocking them to scare me and make me feel unsafe in my own home. I started unplugging every smart device I could find while Tyler kept trying to talk to me through the speakers I hadn't disconnected yet. He was saying things about how much he loved me and how he just wanted to make sure I was safe and happy. But the most disturbing part was that Tyler clearly knew intimate details about my daily routine and personal life that he could only have learned by watching and listening to me constantly. He referenced conversations I'd had with friends, mentioned what I'd had for dinner specific nights, and even commented on the new workout routine I'd been doing in my living room. Tyler knew that I'd been having trouble sleeping, that I'd been considering adopting a cat, and that I'd been thinking about changing jobs. Tyler had been essentially living in my apartment through my smart devices for 4 months, watching my every move and listening to my private conversations. Update: 1 week later. I immediately called the police after disconnecting all my smart devices. The responding officers took my statement and said what Tyler had been doing constituted stalking and harassment, but they needed digital evidence to build a criminal case. I also called my friend Marcus, who works in IT security, to help me document what Tyler had done and secure my systems. Marcus came over that same day and spent hours analyzing my network and devices. What Marcus found was even worse than I'd imagined. Tyler had installed custom firmware on multiple devices that gave him complete administrative access to my smart home network. He could view live feeds from all my cameras, listen through any device with a microphone, and control every connected device in my apartment. Marcus discovered logs showing that Tyler had been accessing my systems daily since about a week after our breakup. He'd been taking screenshots and recordings, which explained how he got those photos he'd been texting me. The technical analysis revealed that Tyler had been incredibly sophisticated in his surveillance. He'd set up automated scripts that would capture and save footage whenever motion was detected, and he'd configured the system to send him real-time alerts about my activities. Tyler had also modified my router's firmware to create a hidden backdoor that would allow him access, even if I changed all my passwords. Marcus said this level of technical sophistication suggested Tyler had been planning this surveillance for some time, possibly even while we were still dating. But the most violating discovery was that Tyler had been recording audio from my apartment continuously. Marcus found hundreds of hours of recordings stored on remote servers that Tyler controlled. Tyler had recordings of me talking to friends, crying after our breakup, singing in the shower, having private phone conversations with my family, basically every moment of my life for the past 4 months. He'd even recorded me talking to myself, including things I'd said about him and our relationship that I'd never shared with anyone else. Marcus also found evidence that Tyler had been using my smart speakers to listen to my phone calls and had been accessing my laptop and other devices through the compromised network. Tyler had essentially turned my entire apartment into a surveillance system that he controlled remotely. The evidence showed that Tyler had been accessing my email, social media accounts, and even my work computer through the network connection. He'd been reading my private messages and had been monitoring my online activity constantly. Marcus helped me document everything and create a comprehensive report for the police. He also completely rebuilt my smart home network from scratch, replacing firmware on devices that could be fixed and recommending replacement of devices that Tyler had permanently compromised. The police said they had enough evidence to charge Tyler with stalking, harassment, unauthorized computer access, and invasion of privacy. They issued a warrant for his arrest. Update: 2 weeks later. Tyler was arrested at his workplace last Monday. According to the detective handling my case, Tyler initially denied everything but eventually admitted to accessing my smart home devices when confronted with the technical evidence Marcus had gathered. Tyler's explanation was that he'd been worried about my safety after our breakup and just wanted to make sure I was okay. He claimed he never intended to scare me and that he'd only been watching to protect me from potential threats. The detective said Tyler seemed genuinely confused about why I was upset, as if he thought monitoring my every move was a reasonable way to show he cared about me. Tyler apparently told investigators that he'd been planning to reveal himself eventually and had hoped that demonstrating his concern for my well-being would convince me to get back together with him. Tyler was charged with multiple felonies related to computer crimes and stalking. His lawyer tried to argue that Tyler had legitimate access to my devices because he'd helped set up the system while we were dating, but the prosecutor pointed out that whatever access Tyler might have had was revoked when I ended our relationship. The prosecutor also noted that Tyler's actions went far beyond any reasonable interpretation of legitimate access, since he'd installed hidden surveillance software and had been secretly recording my private activities for months. Tyler posted bail, but is required to stay away from me and my apartment. He's also not allowed to access any computer systems outside of his work duties, which effectively means he's been suspended from his job pending the outcome of the case. I also got a restraining order against Tyler, which prohibits him from contacting me directly or indirectly through any means, including electronic devices. The whole legal process has been emotionally exhausting, but I'm grateful that law enforcement took the situation seriously and that I had someone like Marcus to help document the technical evidence. Update: 1 month later. Tyler pled guilty to reduced charges in exchange for avoiding a trial. He got 2 years probation, mandatory counseling, and is required to pay for all the smart home devices I had to replace plus the cost of having my systems professionally secured. Tyler also had to provide passwords and access information for all the remote servers where he'd stored recordings of me, so that everything could be deleted under court supervision. The most disturbing part of the plea hearing was when Tyler addressed the court. He gave this speech about how he'd made mistakes, but that everything he'd done came from a place of love and concern for my well-being. Tyler said he realized now that his methods were wrong, but he maintained that his intentions had been good. He never seemed to understand that what he'd done was a serious violation of my privacy and autonomy. The judge was not impressed with Tyler's explanation and told him that love doesn't justify stalking and that concern for someone's safety doesn't give you the right to spy on them without their knowledge or consent. Tyler was also fired from his job. Apparently, his employer had a zero-tolerance policy for employees who used their technical skills to commit crimes, especially privacy violations. Update: 3 months later. I'm doing much better now, though it took a long time to feel comfortable in my own apartment again. Marcus helped me set up a completely new smart home system with much stronger security protocols. I also decided to significantly reduce the number of connected devices I use. No more smart speakers, minimal security cameras, and much more careful consideration of what devices really need internet connectivity. The experience has made me much more aware of digital privacy and the potential risks of smart home technology. I've learned to regularly update device firmware, change default passwords, and monitor my network for unusual activity. I also started seeing a therapist to work through the trauma of having been unknowingly watched and listened to for months. It's been helpful to talk about the violation of privacy and the ways Tyler's surveillance affected my sense of safety and autonomy. The hardest part has been rebuilding my ability to trust people and to feel secure in private spaces. For weeks after discovering Tyler's spying, I felt paranoid about every electronic device and worried that someone else might be watching me. But gradually, with therapy and support from friends, I've been able to reclaim my sense of privacy and security. Update: 6 months later. Tyler completed his probation without incident and apparently moved to another state. According to the detective who handled my case, Tyler has stayed away from me completely and hasn't violated any terms of his restraining order. I heard through mutual friends that Tyler has been telling people he was unfairly prosecuted for trying to protect someone he loved. He apparently still doesn't understand that what he did was stalking and harassment, not protection. I'm in a new relationship now with someone who respects my privacy and understands why I'm cautious about sharing access to my personal devices and accounts. When I told my current boyfriend about what happened with Tyler, his response was immediate outrage on my behalf and complete support for whatever security measures I need to feel safe. The contrast between my new boyfriend's reaction and Tyler's behavior has really highlighted how abnormal and disturbing Tyler's surveillance was. Final update, 1 year later. It's been over a year since I discovered Tyler's spying, and I'm in a much better place both emotionally and practically. I've become something of an advocate for smart home security awareness. I've given talks at local community centers about the importance of securing connected devices and recognizing signs that your technology might be compromised. The response has been incredible. So many people have stories about feeling like their devices were acting strangely or feeling watched in their homes. Many people don't realize how vulnerable smart home technology can be or how to protect themselves from unauthorized access. I've also learned that Tyler's behavior was unfortunately not that unusual. Cases of tech-savvy ex-partners using connected devices for stalking and harassment are becoming more common as smart home technology becomes more widespread. My experience has taught me that digital privacy is just as important as physical privacy, and that the convenience of smart home technology comes with serious security responsibilities. I still use some connected devices, but I'm much more selective about what I connect to the internet and much more diligent about security updates and access controls. I also regularly audit my network and devices to make sure everything is functioning as expected. The most important lesson I learned is to trust my instincts. When things started feeling off with my devices, and I had that sense of being watched, I should have investigated immediately instead of dismissing those feelings as paranoia. Technology should make our lives easier and safer, not provide tools for people to violate our privacy and autonomy. Everyone deserves to feel secure in their own home, both physically and digitally. The moral of the story: if you have smart home devices, take security seriously. Change default passwords, keep firmware updated, and be cautious about who you give access to your systems. And if something feels off with your devices, investigate immediately rather than assuming it's just a glitch. Also, if someone uses technology to spy on you after a breakup, that's not love or concern. It's stalking and it's a crime.